All the questions have been prepared by the League. We will not be taking questions from the audience tonight because of the large group of candidates. So we're going to start with introduction. I am introducing you first to Rufus Gifford. Rufus lives in Concord. He served as finance director for Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. President Obama later appointed him to U.S. ambassador to Denmark. Alexandra Chandler lives in Haverhill. She has a law degree. She served for more than a decade in naval intelligence, which included an assignment at the Pentagon. Jeff Ballinger lives in Andover. He is a lawyer who has spent much of his career focused on labor issues, which included work overseas as a program director in the Asian Institute of the AFL-CIO. Juana Matias? Juana Matias, thank you. Was raised in Hebrew. I may be from Needham, but I do learn. Raised in Hebrew and lives in Lawrence. She immigrated to the United States at the age of 5 from the Dominican Republic. She has a law degree and is currently a member of the State House of Representatives. Bij Das. That's right. Thank you. Lives in Lowell. He is a lawyer and clerked for Judge Benson Legg in the Maryland U.S. District Court. He is currently president and CEO of Troca Hotels. Bopa Malone lives in Bedford. She came to the U.S. as a Cambodian refugee when she was 9. Malone is an executive at Lowell's Enterprise Bank. Lori Train was raised in Lowell and lives in Westford. She was the chief of staff of Congressman Marty Meehan. She currently works at the business consulting firm she has started. Barbara Letellian was raised in Andover, where she still lives. She's currently a state senator and has also served as a member of the State House of Representatives. Daniel Erico lives in Andover. He has an MBA and has worked in research and consulting as well as for the Huffington Post. He served as Boston Mayor Marty Walsh's chief of staff. Leonard Golder is a longtime resident of Stowe. He is a member of Stowe's planning board and has previously served as a Stowe selectman and as a library trustee. He's practiced law for more than 25 years. Can you tell us what are the sources of funding for your campaign, please?
One-word answer. It's my retirement savings. Actually, I have about 7 checks of variety of figures, maybe $50 to $200. That's it.
Thank you. I'm proud to report that the majority of our support has been raised from people who live here, people in the 3rd Congressional District. In fact, I wasn't expecting this. Oh, thank you. I wasn't expecting this to be the first question, but I'm proud to actually report that my contributions from inside the district total more than everybody's in-district contributions sitting on this stage. We've made it a priority in our campaign not to take corporate PAC money, money from Beacon Hill lobbyists or special interests or from people who just aren't from inside this district. We do that because campaign finance reform is a very important issue to me. I worked on the bipartisan campaign reform legislation of 2002. I intend to go down to Washington and continue that fight and be beholden only to the people who send me there. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Good. Thank you so much for being here tonight. What a great crowd. Thank you so much for the question. I'm very proud to have the support of family and friends and people who have seen my work who, quite frankly, think that I'd be a good congressman. I'm very humbled to have that. But I think the reality is so many of us on here would agree that the system is completely broken. That first and foremost, we need to end Citizens United, which was a horrible Supreme Court decision. And we need to go further than that and move to true publicly financed elections. I support the Government for the People Act, which would match low-dollar donations, which I think is very, very important. And I'm proud to have the second most donations raised from the district of this group, and I'm very, very proud to have that. Finally, I'm very, very proud to have the support of Senator Russ Feingold, who was an architect of the McCain-Feingold bill that was one of the true comprehensive campaign finance reform policies in this country, and we need more of it, not less of it. Thank you.
I'm Beach Das. I'm a constitutional lawyer, and I'm the only one on this field of the top candidates that isn't part of the establishment. So I'll tell you, raising money has been a really difficult thing to do. Lori tells you that, hey, you know, I raised the most money, and we're supposed to clap about that. And so does Dan. At the end of the day, this money in the system is corrupting this system. I've asked friends and family. I've asked anyone who will take my call. I actually don't use my cell phone anymore because I don't, if I'm stuck in a car somewhere and I want you to answer my call, I want you to still answer this phone, so you'll get a call from my campaign office, and I'll say, hey, I'm Beach, I'm running, you remember me, give me a check. It's hard. It's really hard. But, you know, we've raised enough to be competitive. We've raised enough, and I've contributed to the campaign myself because we need to change this system, and we need to change it by speaking truth. We got to speak truth to the establishment, and we have to do that by telling people what you've heard in the district. What I'm hearing is very different than what the establishment is telling us to tell you. And so I'm Beach Das. I think we've raised enough money to win this thing, and I'm proud of the sources of capital. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, let me say that this is truly awesome. As all of us have been spending a lot of time in rooms like this over the course of the last 8 months or 10 months or a year, and oftentimes you'll see rooms a half or a quarter full. So this is truly, truly, truly exciting. And as I like to say, Concord is the birthplace of democracy, so it doesn't surprise me, but it's absolutely awesome. So let me just say this. This is, like Beach said, this is absolutely my least favorite part of this campaign. I very often have to sit in a room a couple hours a week making phone calls and being hung up on. That is our system. We get told no far more often than we get told yes. This is frustrating. This is time that we should be out on the road talking to voters. And we absolutely need to reform the system. To answer the question, look, I have been fundraising a good bit of my life. I was Barack Obama's chief fundraiser. Over the course of that, but I got to tell you, it is so much more fun to ask for money for Barack Obama than it ever is for Rufus. I promise you. Over the course of my campaign here, though, yes, I have built a network of national Obama donors, of national LGBT donors. As a married gay man, have been very supportive of my campaign, as well as the foreign policy establishment, who have also been very supportive of my campaign. That being said, money is a corrupting influence in politics. I fully support repealing Citizens United and actually taking Massachusetts' brand of campaign finance and bringing it national. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, it's an indication of how bad the system is. 1 year ago this month, 60% of House Democrats voted for a defense budget $57 billion higher than Donald Trump was asking for, including half of our delegation from Massachusetts. Now, there's only one possible explanation for this, is because they want to curry favor with the defense industry and get those campaign dollars coming in. We've got to stop this, and I am the only one who's brought this up every time, at the beginning and the end, to get money out of politics.
What are the 3 top issues you will focus on if elected to serve in Congress?
Good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. And this manifestation of your presentation of be engaged and to ensure that our country is moving in the right direction is really, really profound. I'm Juana Matias, currently a state representative for the 16th Essex District, the city of Lawrence. And the 3 things that I want to focus on are the following. I think we need to ensure that everyone in this country has access to economic opportunity and security. If you live in the United States and you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty. And in order to accomplish that, we need to make sure that every child has access to a quality education. So it's about expanding access to early childhood education, investing in our K through 12, making sure that we're getting our children prepared for a 21st century education, making sure that if you want to go to college, you're willing to work hard, you're not saddled with decades and decades of debt. I currently have $150,000 worth of debt, and that should not be the cost of getting an education. So it's really about economic opportunity, and I believe that starts with giving every person a quality education, making sure that people have access to meaningful wage and jobs, and then I care deeply about healthcare. In 2013, I saw my father be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. My father was my hero, and watching him battle cancer was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And had it not been for Mass Health, my family could have never afforded the treatment he needed. And even to qualify for Mass Health, my parents, my mother, my father had to sell the home they worked years and years to be able to buy. No American in this country should be concerned that they're one bill away from losing their home. Thank you, and I appreciate the question.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Barbara L'Italian. I have my three biggest concerns that I want to bring down to Washington are these. I started in politics because of my own son who struggled with autism. I needed to work on a system that did not ensure that despite the fact that I paid health insurance premiums, my son was not going to get covered for the behavioral, communication, and other care that he needed. So I feel that healthcare is one of the great equalizers in this state, in this world, and I believe that we need to go down to Washington and work on a single-payer, universal Medicare for all program. Having health insurance does not mean you have access to care. So that is number one, and I have been endorsed by the Mass Care organization here in Massachusetts, seen as most likely to be able to carry that forward. Secondly, I want to fight against the charterization, privatization, voucherization of education. We need to have a strong, robust public school system that is second to none. We ought not to be arming teachers with guns. We ought to be arming them with supplies, ancillary staff, and the funds needed to make sure that kids get a 21st century education. And lastly, I think that the environment needs to concern all of us. We need to go down to Washington and say that the science is real and that we need to do something right away to re-enter the Paris Climate Accord, to take our place among the other nations that understand that this is a man-made problem that we have to work on. Thank you.
My first memory as a child when I was 3 was walking with my mother on foot from Cambodia to Thailand. And growing up in the Thai refugee camp, I would always hear of bombings and gunfires. My daughter right now, who's 8 years old, almost the same age as when I came here to the US, you know, we see the difference because my children gets to hear lullabies and read books, where for us, sleeping at night, we would listen to our parents making decisions which child they were going to take. So immigration is very important to me because of the fact that I truly believe that, for me, I've been very lucky to have had a life, that America has offered us a lifeline here. And for us to have made it and to achieve our American dream. So I believe everyone else should have the same opportunities. If their country are not safe, we should offer a helping hand. Second, I truly believe, growing up, I was very lucky to have had a great education. And I think education is a foundation of our economy, of our strong economy and national security. A country as rich as ours should not be able to not offer our kids a quality education that's free and that's quality. And third, I would say gun control. As a mother, it's not right for me to send my kids to school and be afraid that they would not come back home to me. So that's very scary.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming. The top 3 priorities that I would like to address in Congress would be living wage jobs, health, and protecting our democracy. All of these have a personal aspect for me. When it comes to living wage jobs, I grew up in a family where my dad was often between jobs growing up, and I witnessed those fraught conversations at the dinner table. So when I talk about that, every full-time job in this country should be a living wage job, and we can do a whole series of policies from expanding the earned income tax credit, profit sharing, other things to get us there, the federal minimum wage. When I talk about health, I talk about moving to a single-payer health system. I'm someone who's been without health insurance and writhing on the floor in pain because of it, herniated disc in my case, after law school. I've also worked on the board of a community health center. So I will move us in that direction. And that also means integration fully between healthcare and addiction care, because my dad also struggled with addiction, and it's part of why I lost him when I was 17. And then finally, protecting our democracy. I started serving the intelligence community after 9/11. I understand what's at stake for this critical moment for our country and the world. And I can stand up to the corruption. I'm a Russian-speaking lawyer and former intelligence community leader. My average median donation this last quarter and through this campaign is $27. I can shine the brightest line in between what is right and what is based on the people and our will and the corruption that we see in Washington and the interference with our democracy.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you all for coming out here tonight. It's a great turnout, and it speaks well for a town that's the birthplace of democracy. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this discussion. There are three issues that I will focus on. They do overlap into some other issues as well. The economy, number one. And the big thing with the economy right now is Donald Trump is trumpeting how, unemployment is going down and look at how great he is. But what's not being talked about or looked at is the fact that wages are stagnant. People are not gaining any wage increase, and they haven't for the last 20 years. So that's something I want to focus on. And that has many moving parts to it. It means increasing the minimum wage. It means giving tax credits instead of tax cuts for corporations to train and hire people. It means increasing the earned income tax credit to give people more money and more buying power. So that's one issue. And of course, education is always a key issue, no matter what's going on in this country. I think we need to increase our aid to education. I think we also need to incentivize communities that are hurting to get them to reduce property taxes in exchange for getting additional aid to education. We have to do something more about student loan debt, which is enormous. We have to give forgiveness for interest and a public service component for students to go into any program that's their chosen career and public service oriented. So these are some of the things that I will focus on that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to quickly point out that all of the issues we're talking about here has one factor that's driving it first and foremost. That should be the issue that's top of everyone's mind. Donald Trump and how we get this man out of office. Every single one of these issues, gun control, healthcare, the environment, is being driven by a madman in the White House who isn't fit for office. So I think any person who wants to seek this seat, first and foremost, needs to be fighting and standing up to this president on every single issue. Because you can't address the symptoms if you don't diagnose the illness, and that illness is Donald Trump.
What approach will you take as a newly elected representative to Congress to help this district?
Thank you. Obviously the most important question. The first thing, and just so you know, when I launched this campaign, I traveled each and every day over and over and over again to each one of the 37 cities and towns in this district. I listened, I asked questions, I took notes, and tried to get a sense. I mean, think about this. We'll spend the morning in Lawrence, the lunchtime in Concord, and the evening in Fitchburg, or the evening in Gardner. These are three remarkably different communities, and delivering for each one of these communities is different as well. But what is in common? What do these communities have in common? We have got to fight, as other folks on this stage have said, for a Medicare for all type healthcare system. We desperately need good living wage jobs. We've talked a lot about climate change. We've talked a lot about good paying jobs. Well, I have an aggressive green jobs bill that not only will save the planet by investing in renewable energy type jobs like windmills and solar, but it actually puts people back to work. I served for 4 years in Denmark. I stared out at offshore wind farms for 4 years, and I said to myself, how do you bring that type of Scandinavian-style renewable energy right here to Massachusetts? Well, guess what? We are building the first offshore wind farm in the country, just a commercial scale one, just south of Martha's Vineyard, and it will likely be built by a Danish company. And this is the kind of stuff that we got to do. And we're going to be building, we should be building these windmills right in the 3rd District of Massachusetts. So that's just got to, and also infrastructure.
And also infrastructure.
Look,
talk is cheap. Okay? Let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I was a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer. I left big law firm life in Boston because I said, I'm making rich people richer. I was not put on this earth to do that. So I started my own law firm. After saving people's businesses, I had a tough time collecting money because I didn't want to ruin what I just saved. So I started a hotel company.
Well, the hotel company I have, when we shut down in 2016 after a climate change-driven flood, I paid everyone's salary for 6 months, not a penny coming in, took a federal tax lien. Look at what each of us does. If we rail against money in politics, don't raise $4 million for this race. Do something to be consistent with what you're saying. I have done for this district, and I continue to do because it's in my blood. The one thing I would tell you is we should listen to us all. Let's listen, and then let's not preach. Let us listen and let us represent. Donald Trump, you know, I didn't vote for him, but you know what? Almost 50% of this district did. What we need to do is reconcile our viewpoints with their viewpoints to create a collective us. And then we represent us all in this district. That's what I will do. Thank you.
The first part of this, I think, is about constituent service. And I would take some of the lessons that I bring from the intelligence community, where I was a division chief and I had one of those special phones that would ring at 3 in the morning, and I would have to determine whether we were going to wake up someone in the White House or an admiral on the other side of the planet. What that would do is drive my thinking, my priorities as to what we're going to focus on in the next day. And that's the philosophy that I would try to bring to serving as your congresswoman. Participatory leadership. You, the citizens, drive it. So that's the philosophical point. But then practically, in terms of what I already see, I would look right at the beginning to infrastructure. Because when I was talking about living wage jobs, by definition, those are jobs that are right here. And if we do right at the federal level in terms of how the grant money is allocated, they will be living wage jobs, and they will unlock economic opportunity. So that's the first part. I would say on the healthcare side, here in Massachusetts, we're fortunate that we mostly have cost problem. So I would really prioritize on the way to single care healthcare, going after pharmaceutical company costs, having Medicare negotiate the price of prescription drugs, and stopping them from advertising on TV, things like that, and then move it left. Concrete benefits early on. But most of all, I will be there to take this call at any time or day or night, and that will be the philosophy that I will bring to my staff.
So this district has been well served by sending to Washington a progressive Democrat who's focused on economic development and really addressing the economic anxiety that we see in all corners of this district. Attracting businesses to take advantage of our highly skilled labor, whether that's in manufacturing, defense, research, bringing infrastructure back to the district and delivering hard hat jobs that revitalize our communities and put people to work. People like my dad, who was a union iron worker. I grew up in one of those working class families in Lowell. And I know it's really hard to think about anything else when you're worried about living paycheck to paycheck. Third, we need to increase exposure to more alternative paths to education beyond college. Investing in our vocational and trades program, our community college program, and our apprenticeships. You know, I had the privilege of serving in a congressional office for nearly 10 years, eventually becoming a chief of staff, where it was me who modeled the type of behavior and the type of office we were going to be, an accessible and a responsive office. When we had to pass the Suwasco River watershed protection here in Concord, we responded to the community's call for action. When we needed to find funding down in Washington to put money together for mill redevelopment in Lawrence, we found that funding. So I intend to work hard here for the district on economic development.
Okay, so for over 10 years, I've been working at Enterprise Inc. I've been helping families to make sure they get into their homes and building their businesses. And in addition to that, this is not even my job. I've been serving as a community activist. I've been a part of Lowell General Hospital, Middlesex Community College. I still am, actually. Girls Inc., Women Working Wonders. These are the things that I've been advocating for over 10 years and have been working. So I haven't lived a politician's life, but what I can do and tell you is that I have been advocating for the community. So for example, in the greater Lowell area, with working cities, we got $500,000 for the city to help with system change in the Acre neighborhood. At Middlesex Community College, I advocated for $1.7 million to help a group of students. So these are the things that I will continue to do. And because our district is so diverse, what I would do is make sure that we have a diverse staff to serve everyone. Make sure that everything is in different languages. That's what we've been doing in Lowell, system change. And you know, I've been out talking to people. Everyone is affected by the opioid epidemic, and we need to address that right away as well. So I would bring in my fresh ideas, and basically what I have been doing that has been working for a community that involves everyone, and making sure every voice is heard.
How will you, if elected, balance delivering the results desired by the district with the goals of the national party you are a member of?
Well, first of all, I don't really see a conflict with the interests of the district and the interests of the National Democratic Party. I think we as Democrats have goals that are very much in keeping with what the district and the country needs right now. Things like affordable health care, which I feel should be done through Medicare from womb to tomb. Things like an end to gun violence, which I feel the majority of people in this district believe and understand. We have to get rid of assault weapons and, more important, magazine clips, because those facilitate the use of dangerous weaponry that can harm people in a matter of seconds. We also have to, as I mentioned before, do more to support education, and that includes giving more aid to education, reducing property taxes in exchange for more education, and of course the bottom line is jobs. And jobs are always the key to any economy. And I don't see a conflict in the goals that we as Democrats have versus this district. We just have to get out there and reach people and give them our message, and I think we can be more successful than we were in the presidential election 2 years ago.
Thank you. My family comes from two different parts of this world, Lebanon and Korea. They couldn't have looked more different, they couldn't have spoken a more different language, but they had one thing in common, and that's they believed in this country. And so they came to Lawrence, Massachusetts. My great-grandfather didn't have a good education, but he worked hard. He worked in the mills. His son, my grandfather, served in the military, eventually opened up a small business that my mom and her two brothers run today. And as a result, a Korean-Lebanese guy has a chance to be congressman from his hometown district. My family has lived the American dream. And I think the Democratic Party needs to stand for the building blocks that make the American dream possible for all of us. And we should be proud to say that we are the party that invests in the people who need it most. You bet we're going to invest the money for single-payer health care, because the least that we can do is make sure that everyone can afford quality care. You bet that we are going to invest in education, universal pre-K, community college and free public education, so that everyone can get a leg up. And you bet we're going to make sure to fight for the values that make the American dream possible. Fight for common sense gun reform. Fight against Secretary DeVos and her crazy direction she's trying to take our public education system. So instead of being concerned about what Democratic infighting, let's talk about being proud to be Democrats. Proud to be investing in the values and the pathways so that everyone has a leg up in this country.
Look, I think we need to elect progressive leaders who are going to be unapologetic about our values. And I think that the Democratic Party has failed in doing this. We have Democrats who pass budget after budget without immigration proposals. We have Democrats who talk about a universal health care system, but when the vote is presented before them, they don't act upon it. We need to do better. And we need to know what is it that we stand for as a party, and we need to make sure that we're electing working class candidates. People who understand what it's like living paycheck to paycheck. People who understand what it's like to have a loved one who is sick and the difficulties of navigating that healthcare system. And our party has failed to do that. The people we elect who aren't representative of our communities, and until we give people who are feeling that pain, who are affected by these issues, a seat at the table, we're going to continue not to see these issues be addressed. And that's what makes me different than any other candidate in this race. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. I come from a poor working class household, and had it not been for the public education I received, I could not sit before you all today. And we need to do better as a country to elect those people who are going to go there and take the tough votes. And I was proud last week in the Massachusetts State House to vote against a budget that continued to be silent when we don't have immigration protections here in Massachusetts. It was disgraceful, and I'm willing to take those tough votes, and I'm willing to lead and show what it is that we need more of in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
I think this third district is vocal. It has been for decades, for a century, you know, since the Bread and Roses strike. This is an incubator for the American labor movement. This is something that's bred into people here. And up until, you know, the recent National Grid strike, and like the market basket strike, this is where consumers got together with the workers and they fought that business turning corporate. This is vocal. And what I don't see from Washington is anybody speaking about one issue down the road. Hundreds of our neighbors lost their jobs at a high-tech company, wind turbine company called AMSC. In 2011, their biggest customer stole their technology, and hundreds of workers lost their jobs. And just in the last year, the first ever federal criminal case against a Chinese company for intellectual property theft was won in a federal district court. And nobody from the Energy and Commerce Committee, no Democrats, stood up and said, let's bring the CEO and an engineer and some workers down to Washington and celebrate this, because Republicans have so demonized government and regulation for 40 years that they've got most Americans thinking they're right. We have to celebrate and talk about when we win something. And you know what? That company then settled, instead of $800 million worth of damage that was caused, according to the federal court, they settled 2 weeks ago for $57 million. This could have been different if some Democrats had spoken up, but that's what's missing now between the Democrats and the 3rd District.
I have spent the last couple of weeks literally bringing my kitchen table that I bought in 1985 was when I was engaged to be married, around here at Concord, to Fitchburg, to Lowell, and to other places. And I see my kitchen table as a metaphor for what I need to do as your congressperson. What do we do at our kitchen tables? Mine's splattered with paint from my 4 children. My table is where we planned out, we fed our children. They did their homework. We paid our bills. And boy, I can remember my dad struggling paying his bills. It's where we sat and planned out how we were going to take care of my son with autism and my mother with Alzheimer's. And so I see that as a metaphor, and bringing that kitchen table around, that my job is to come around and engage with all of you and find out what are your central issues, what are your kitchen table issues, what do you care about. And having been a legislator for 15 years, and I'm the only one up here that has that kind of legislative experience, I'm smart enough to realize that I need to take my cues from all of you in terms of what you want me to do within the confines of your district. That said, I also will say that I'm a feisty woman. I think some of you saw that this morning. I am not afraid to stand up. I stood up to the Speaker of the House when I first entered the legislature. I stood up in a Me Too moment with our Senate President when people were being abused in the Senate. And I stood up today to Donald Trump and his divisive politics. So it's really a combination of local and national.
If your answer to this question is yes, would you please raise your hand? Should marijuana be decriminalized at the federal level? Next, should marijuana be legalized at the federal level? Did everybody get that one? Okay. Next, ready? Should students graduate from college debt-free? Notice we're not asking how they should graduate. Okay, and this was along the same line. Should college tuition be free? Okay, everybody see that? Should healthcare be single payer for Medicare or Medicare for all? Okay. Do you support the ERA? Okay. Do you support 1 year of federally paid child care leave for all? What will be your priorities, your main priority for your first term in Congress should you be elected?
I've been marching with the gas workers, the National Grid locked out gas workers. You know the one thing that everyone says that's criminal is that they were knocked out health insurance, right? They're negotiating in good faith, and then they're knocked off health insurance by being walked out. Now, some of these people have, they're working with hazardous materials. They've done it. Most of them started with colonial gas 30 plus years ago. And they've been doing good work for good pay and benefits the whole time. We've got to take healthcare off the table. I run a small business, as I mentioned before, when we were shut down, I paid all those salaries and benefits. 75 employees that would have lost their benefits had I decided, as I was told by the insurance, to terminate all non-essential employees. I couldn't do it. Hopefully my business survives. I took a federal tax thing to do it. But we take an obligation to our employees, and as a representative, I believe fundamentally that we need to take healthcare off the table. Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. Obamacare did not do what it was supposed to do. Fundamentally, our premiums went up. My mom, who's sitting in there, she takes her Advair is $200 as a copay every month. Who can afford that? And so fundamentally, I would prioritize healthcare. Take it off the table. Make sure it, like anything else, is provided by the federal government. It's no different between healthcare and terrorism. Thank you.
I'm going to answer this question a little bit differently because, well, so we just had a lightning round where I think we all answered pretty universally about what we want to see in the United States. Big federal programs, what I think we stand for, FDR-style politics, standing for something big. I also spent the last 4 years in Denmark, right? And I spent a lot of time in left-leaning Democratic Party rooms quite like this. And I get asked all the time, why can't the United States be more like Denmark, right? Why can't we have free education? Why can't we have universal health care? Why can't we have good roads and bridges? And I asked them this question. Guess what Danes pay in sales tax on their car? The answer is 150%. And so, why are they willing to pay 150% sales tax on their car? Because they trust government to spend their money. So, what we need to do, and what my primary focus is, if you've been following my campaign at all, you hear me talk about trust over and over and over again. And fundamentally, I don't believe that we are going to get universal health care done. I don't think we're going to get aggressive climate legislation. I don't think we're going to get student loan relief or a big infrastructure spending bill or great immigration reform the way I think so many of us on this stage want to see it, unless we deal with this issue of trust, make people feel like government has their back. It is FDR time again, my friends, truly, and that's what we got to do.
My main objective is to get started a corporate crime database at the Department of Justice because there's just too much impunity for corporations that are running roughshod over worker rights. And one perfect example is this Toys R Us story. You must know, Bain Capital, leveraged buyout, $5 billion they borrowed and dumped the debt on Toys R Us. Toys R Us was crushed by this debt. Bain Capital didn't care. They collected their $50 million, but 33,000 people lost their jobs. We talked to some of them here in the district. This is not happening in America for only one reason. This is happening in America because of corporate ownership of Washington. Corporations donate so much money to Washington that there is nothing that they can't do. Look at the defense budget, would you? This is just out of control. So I'd also mention the other corporation that was recently in the news, the duck boat operator. How did the duck boat operator continue to operate when they were in violation of some safety codes? Well, they hired a revolving door person from the National Transportation Safety Board. This is how Washington works. You hire somebody out of government into your company, even if you've had previous fatal accidents, you think they're just going to get you over. So we've got to stop this. It's long past due.
My number one priority, as I mentioned before, would be standing up against this president who is destroying our democracy, who every single day says something crazier than the day before, so you forget about it, but that hurts democracy just the same. All of the issues we could talk about today. When it comes to universal health care, this is a president who tried to take health care away from 23 million Americans. When we talk about an economy that works for everyone, this is a president who passed a $1.5 trillion tax cut to the 1% in corporations that don't need it. When we talk about the environment, this is a president who pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords, perhaps the single biggest dereliction of his duty. When we talk about education, this is a president who believes in privatizing education, who appointed Secretary DeVos, who has absolutely no clue what she is doing. That is what is happening in our democracy, and we can never normalize this behavior. When I was Chief of Staff to Mayor Walsh, I stood up to President Trump with the mayor. When he instituted the racist travel ban, we doubled down in Boston and said everyone is welcome to City Hall. And if you're feeling threatened, documents or not, we will protect you if you come to us. And we stood up to President Trump when it came to the Paris Climate Accords, saying that Boston would be carbon neutral 2050, no matter what the president says. He is the biggest issue facing our country today, and we can never take it lightly, and we can never normalize it. Thank you.
I get into this race because I think about the income inequality gap all the time. I think about families like mine, families like the one I grew up in. They're not benefiting from the Dow Jones or record unemployment. They're not making a living wage. They can't afford their health care benefits. They can't afford to send their kids to college. So you saw me sort of temper my answer on free college. I believe in free college for people who need it. I believe that any kid who wants to go to college should not be neglected or closed from that path. It was the right path for me, and I'm reminded every single day that it put me on the path I'm on today. But it's not for everybody. I went to Lowell High School. I started my freshman year with 900 students. I graduated with 540. To think that all my graduating class was in the pursuit of college is insanity. We need to make noble and expose more paths to education. We need to invest in trades programs, technical programs, apprenticeship programs, community college that puts kids skilled up into the workforce faster so that they can get a good paying job. They can support their family, they can start their life, and they don't have to sink under this burden of college debt. We need to hold colleges accountable for the skyrocketing tuition that they're charging. Georgetown, which I got to go to on a scholarship, 3x increase in 25 years. This is not sustainable. We need to hold colleges accountable for the default rates these kids we're seeing across the board. So education and closing this income inequality gap once and for all. Thank you.
Rufus mentioned the Danish system and how it works because people have trust in that system. I went to school in Denmark, and so I'm pretty familiar with how the Danish system works. And the reason it works is it's more than just trust. It's because the Danes come up with programs that universally help people. And that's what we need in this country. That's why I support, for example, Medicare for all, because everybody will pay in and everybody will get something back. That's how Social Security works, for example, and that's why Social Security is the most popular program in the world, in the country. Everybody pays in, everybody gets something back. So what we need to do is not just talk about trust, we need programs that will universally help everybody.
What are the sources of funding for your campaign?
Basically, my sources of fundings are friends, families, colleagues. If you look at my campaign financing, the people that I served have given to me, but they don't have that type of money to be given to me at that level. I mean, the people that I know are like everyday people like you. They think I'm crazy if I call and say, can I get $2,700? And I would feel bad to even ask you that because I know how, you have been struggling. So, I don't have, I truly believe that we should get rid of money in politics because it should, it takes away from good candidates that are viable, that have worked hard in the community, but because they don't have access to money, they don't have a voice. And that would be an area that I would focus on when in Congress.
As I mentioned earlier, the median donation to our campaign is $27. So the type of people who give $27 are the people that have donated to my campaign. which is basically people like you out there, and specifically friends, colleagues from my intelligence community time. What can I say? You don't get pretty wealthy working for the intelligence community for 13 years. You just don't. I could have gone the international corporate law path, but I was in 9/11. I was in New York City on 9/11. I took a different path. And I'll tell you where I don't get my money. I rejected the playbook of making the calls to people that can give me $2,700, either all at once or a little at a time. Because it's not just the corruption, and it taints us all that take a cent or more. But it's also, it distorts your viewpoint. Because you start to think about what's the most important thing to the people I've been talking with today. And if you spend 5 hours a day talking to those people, bless them, it's going to be a different priority. So that's why I signed up as a candidate with a contract, committing me upon resignation from Congress if I don't introduce a bill to pass Citizens United, overturn gerrymandering, promote publicly funded elections. Big money is the enemy of the big ideas that we all want on the stage. And I say, with all the best intentions that are here, if you go there and you don't have broad-based working middle-class support behind you, you're going to crash into that wall too.
Well, I'll tell you where I'm not seeking money, and that's from corporations or people that do business with the government that I represent. You know, I sit on a planning board. I've represented the town of Stowe for over 12 years now. And there are people that come before the planning board, developers, attorneys, engineers, consultants. I have not asked, and I won't accept any money from any people that I do business with in my capacity with government. I won't accept money from corporations. The money I get comes from people that know me for years, people from where I live, people that I went to school with. And by the way, I don't buy into this notion that the money has to come from within the district. You know, I have high school classmates I went to prep school with that grew up in Massachusetts like I did, that lived all over the world, and if they're willing to donate money to my campaign, the fact that they don't live within the parameters of the 3rd district, to me, I don't understand the logic to that. My big concern is that we don't, and everybody likes to rail against Citizens United, but let's live, you know, let's not just talk the talk, let's walk the walk, not accept corporate money, and especially not accept money, you know, if you, from people that you're doing business with the government.
The most difficult component of this entire race for me has been this term of viability, and it's been measured about whether you can raise or not. As a woman of color, a Latina, an immigrant who was raised in a poor working class household, it has been the most challenging and frustrating aspect of this entire congressional race. It is shameful that our entire electorate system is based on how much money you can raise and not your commitment and record of public service. When I graduated law school, I came back to this very district to work as a social worker. When I graduated law school, I went and worked and defended children who were facing deportation, completing asylum work. And any organization you meet with throughout this congressional race does not care about your track record of service. They care about money. And until we change that, we're not going to be able to represent and be a voice for those who are rendered voiceless. We need to repeal Citizens United. We need to get big money out of politics. We need to support the public financing of elections. And until we do not do that, we're going to continue electing those that are well-connected, well-funded, who come from money. I'm the only candidate in this race who has not given or loaned herself any money, because I simply can't. I simply cannot. But I can tell you this, I'm committed to being a voice for working class people across this district. I'm committed to being unapologetic and leading on the issues that we should care about as Democrats. And until we elect people like that, things aren't going to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'll say a couple of things. I agree with this notion that viability should not equal how much money your boss or your dad or your connections can allow you to leapfrog over other people to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars in a month's time. That I reject absolutely. Ironically today, because of going on and speaking truth to power, as I've done over the last 15 years as a legislator, actually was able to raise money from all over the country today. Incredibly enough, and it was a lot of small donations, but people who feel like They want to see a leader who's not afraid to stand up and speak truth to power. I've been doing it over the last 15 years. I have a record of service of 15 years, and no one else has that. I have put my name on the legislation in Massachusetts as a co-sponsor and voted on and taken to the podium 2 weeks ago, trying to defend the notion that corporations are not people. I have lived that credo. I don't have big bank money. I have big autism money. I have people that I've helped on autism. I have big elder money. I have people who have helped be maintained in the community, seniors to live with dignity. I reject the notion that this is about big money and that money equals viability. It ought to be about thoughts, leadership, having a backbone, and a record of service.
I spent 10 years working with Congressman Marty Meehan to get that big money, that corrupted influence of money that I saw too often infiltrate the House floor of the People's House, frankly. And so I know that this campaign is about walking the walk. And there's too much Beacon Hill lobbyist money coming into this race. There's too much Wall Street money and special interest money coming into this race. It might not matter if our contributions are from inside the district, but you know what? I think it does matter. I think that getting someone, after you've been campaigning for 10 months, to support your campaign is more important than being beholden to corporate interests. Thank you.
Let's just be honest. The person that just preceded me at the microphone was
let's focus on the issue.
Is the beneficiary of the fact that she was the keeper of Marty Meehan's campaign account. She has all of those connections, and she has been able to raise money by virtue of her affiliation with Marty. So let's not be disingenuous here. That is a source, and that is why we've been able to do that within the greater Lowell area. So let's just be honest about that, okay? That is what has happened in your particular instance. I do believe that this is a corrupting influence, and I do believe that it is a huge influence in this district.
Thank you.
I love seeing the establishment candidates argue about who borrowed from who and who's paying for it. It's time for new blood. I'm not a politician, and it's time for new blood.
What skills and experiences will you draw upon to represent the district in Congress?
For the past 4 years, I was so fortunate to be Chief of Staff to Mayor Marty Walsh in Boston, overseeing a staff of 18,000 and $3 billion organization. And the thing that made me most happy every single day was being able to help people on the ground, because the reality is, in cities and towns, that's where the real government helps people the most. When you have a 12-inch snowstorm coming, and there's a senior center that you know is going to lose power, you can't wait till the next legislative session to get something done. You've got to figure out where to take those seniors and help them the most. When there is someone who has a tree fall in their yard and they can't get out, it's up to you to make sure you're helping that person first and foremost. That's what I view politics and government as should be all the time, is helping as many people as possible with the issues that are facing them every day. Because the reality is constituents don't care what's a city or state or federal issue, they just want help. And that's what this should all be about, helping people. So every single thing that I do, whether it be healthcare, whether it be jobs, whether it be infrastructure, is through that lens. And most importantly, I want to be accessible to all of you. So my cell phone number is 978-225-7455. Write it down. You can call me right after this. I'll hold it up. You can call me if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, because the least I can do is be accountable to you and return every single phone call, because that's what government should be, talking directly with your elected officials. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to tell you about my public service. And it's not traditional in terms of being elected and serving in office, but when I was abroad for the AFL-CIO, they sent me to Indonesia. And I lived there 3 years. And I saw the conditions of these workers making 86 cents a day when I arrived there. And 80% of the women working for that wage were anemic. And they were making products for our market. And I said, instead of going on to my next foreign assignment in Thailand or the Philippines or wherever, I quit my job. I took my 401k and I said, I'm going to tell the American people that those $70 Nike shoes would have $1 labor cost, and workers are getting slapped around in the process. I quit my job, the best job in the labor movement. And I quit it to come and bring this story to Americans. And you know what? 5 years later, Phil Knight, the founder and CEO, was in front of the National Press Club saying, our brand has become synonymous with slave wages and exploitative working conditions. Now, that's what I'm going to bring to Washington. You've got to be vocal. I'll be on the steps of that Capitol building more often than I'll be sitting, because there are so many things that need addressing. And that's what I am, an activist. I'm going to bring activist skills to that Congress, and they won't know what hit them.
What I want to bring to Washington, I think, that makes me unique again, is the 15 years of being a legislator. I have had to block harmful things, such as when gay marriage passed in the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts, and the eyes of the world were looking at us. And I was one of those folks as a freshman legislator who stood up and played an active role in making sure that people would be able to marry who they loved. Many of my colleagues were hiding in their offices, but I have a dogged determination. I stand up. I am a leader. I am unafraid. I've been able to negotiate pieces of legislation. I'll be doing an Equifax bill on consumer protection in the Massachusetts Senate that will be released this week. I have passed pieces of legislation. I know how to work with my colleagues, work with the grassroots, work with my constituents, work with experts to get those things done, and have done that over 15 years, and that is something that no one else up here can say. I have a backbone. I'm not afraid. I have stood up on issues of healthcare, civil rights, the environment, education, and on it goes. And I think that I will bring that skill set of negotiating, of leading, of listening, of doing constituent services. I've done all of these things, and that's what I can bring down to Washington on your behalf.
I have 28 years of experience in local government, and when you're dealing with local government, you're dealing with just about every issue that somehow translates on a national level, whether it's education, the environment, housing, inclusion, and particularly, I served on the Board of Selectmen. I've also served on the Planning Board, and I can tell you, in particular, the Planning Board is a place where you don't win too many friends or influence friendships. You have to take some tough stands. Every time somebody wants to come in and build some housing and include people, you get at least a dozen or 24 people that say, no, it's going to increase the traffic, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. But we really know the real reason is they don't want people to have the same opportunity that they have. I've taken stands in favor of inclusion. I've taken stands when nobody else in the room supported what I was doing. And I'll tell you what my role model, my mantra is. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution, that was the de facto declaration of war for Vietnam. There were 2 U.S. senators who voted against that Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Not household names, good trivia question. They're my role model for government. That's the kind of stand I've taken. That's the kind of stand I will take when I believe that something has to be done and it requires courage and conviction.
I'm going to be my disposition of being authentic, because I do agree with Rufus that there is this distrust when it comes to our public sector and our public service and our officials. So, and I'm going to bring my experience in the State House. I've been there for less than a year and a half, and I've passed legislation. I've worked to bring people who have never been at the table together to discuss very controversial issues. I'm very proud to be the lead sponsor of the State Communities Act in the Massachusetts State House. And I knew very early on, as soon as I walked into that building, that it was going to be a difficult issue to take on. And I was able to get law enforcement behind this after years of negotiations, working with over 150 coalitions behind this bill to bring consensus, to find common ground, and to ensure that Massachusetts does not continue to be silent. And I think that it's easy to talk a big game about these issues and then fail to follow it up with actions. So it's easy to get on the media and talk about how you're for immigrants, but then when those tough votes are in front of you, you fail to actually be a voice for those families that continue to live in fear in this state. And I think with my track record in the State House, I've demonstrated that I'm going to always stand for my values and be a voice for people who are struggling to get by, and that I'm not going to politicalize issues to benefit me when it's convenient. Thank you.
I'm going to bring skill and experience in working across divisions in Washington with people that aren't at all like me. I joined the intelligence community after 9/11. I worked under the Bush administration, Obama administration, having helped me briefly under the Trump administration. And I had to work with Republican appointees and Democrats. I had to work with Republican members of Congress and their staffs and Democrats, work across government. When we're providing intelligence to try to stop an arms shipment to terrorists, but there's also trade negotiations going on, deconflicting all of those things, and having to work with people and build relationships, not just in a comparatively friendly array of Democrats, or at the State House or in other places where there's a lot of agreement, but with people, some of whom would even doubt my basic humanity, because I've led intelligence delegations in the Middle East. And I'll get to some of this too, in that I'm someone who struggled, and I'll bring empathy and struggle into Congress. I am someone who's had an auditorium about this big, half of it cheer that I should be fired for being a transgender woman. And then I showed up to work the next day. And then, when a transgender military ban was tweeted, I showed up while still working in government in front of the White House with a bullhorn. I'm someone who stopped the middle-class mom struggles of daycare costs and student loans. I'm someone whose dad died because of addiction. I'll bring the realities, but the optimism too, because I'm still standing despite all of that. And I will bring that with me to Congress.
I have experience down in Washington, that matters. That actually gives me confidence that I'll hit the ground running because I worked on legislation with Democrats and with Republicans. And to be honest, I'm not unlike any other woman out there who wouldn't apply for a job she knew she couldn't do. But what skills am I going to bring specifically? You know, I have the fortitude to rise up in a male-dominated tech world. I was the only executive at a high-tech company in Cambridge. I started my own business with 2 other women from Harvard Business School, aimed at getting more women into leadership roles in companies across the country. We don't need to read another studies, you know, that better decisions are made when more women are at the table. And this Congress needs more women serving, certainly not less. So, unlike what Doss will have you believe, I am not an establishment candidate. I'm not benefiting from anyone helping me. You know how I'm doing this? Same work ethic my unionized worker dad and my domestic worker mom raised me with. It's soul crushing to raise money. No one wants to do it. It's like why good people don't run. The only way I can go down there and change it is if I get there. And that's what I'm committed to doing. Changing this system once and for all. Thank you.
So I graduated from college. My father was a banker in Boston, and I wanted to be anything but a banker in Boston. So I moved to Los Angeles. I started a few businesses, small businesses that failed. I fell on my face a few times in my 20s. In 2004, I walked into John Kerry's presidential campaign office. I quit my job, walked into John Kerry's presidential campaign office, and I said, put me to work. I was a young gay kid, trying to find my place in the world and trying to figure out how to stand on my own 2 feet. And when I walked into that political office, I realized what I was meant to do in this world. Then I started working and helping elect Democrats, good progressives around the country. And then the moment that changed my life was January 3rd, 2007. I met a young African-American senator named Barack Obama. I knew in that moment that I would be working for him. I had no idea that that 2 years would turn into 10. Listen, I worked at the top levels of government, both political and in government itself. And I served the country overseas. I understand both the domestic issues and the international issues. And most importantly, I believe in this system. I was in Grant Park in Chicago the moment we elected the first African-American president, something we never dreamed that we could do. I was part of the team that helped pass the Affordable Care Act, that overturned Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That overseas, we were all part of the team that helped pass the Paris Climate Agreement. This is the best of the United States. I believe in the system. I also understand that we're at a political crisis moment in the United States, and we need that kind of global perspective.
Well, ever since America had offered me a home, all my life I've been giving back and taking care of others, even though it wasn't my job. So what I would bring is the compassion of serving in the community and taking care of others and being kind. One of my traits that I love most is that I'm a good listener. I love listening and learning from people. And that's what I will continue to do. I'm a Rotarian. We are trained to put service above self. And I would bring my values of integrity and making sure that, you know, I'm not going there. It's not because of me. It's because I have achieved my American dream, and I want to make sure that everyone in this room and others are able to have what I've been able to experience. So as a refugee, as a mother, as a woman, as a career person, and as a community activist, I will be able to serve everyone. And I think it's so important with everything that's happening in this climate right now that we send someone like me there, because there's not enough of us there to be able to have a voice. Thank you.
So my dad left India in 1964 with $8 in his pocket. He had a dream. And it's because of that dream I stand before you today. I'm so proud to be an American. I'm so proud to be part of that dream. Dad came here from Germany. The only word he could speak was Wasser, so he could ask for water when he landed. He left Germany with enough money to bring his entire family over, educate us all, and give us this dream. But the dreams come with struggles. When Mom started at the University of Massachusetts Lowell as a professor, President O'Leary said, "But Mitra, why do you need so much money? You have a husband. He has a job." When history repeats itself, when President Marty Meehan didn't support and has been culling older faculty members, that's history repeating itself. So we've got to speak truth to power once in a while. And what I offer this race is a difference that is not as palpable as saying, okay, well, these are my credentials. We need somebody who understands the Constitution as I do, who has a business that employs a lot of people, that have healthcare concerns and other things, and I care. That's important. I ask for your vote. I'm Beach Das. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thanks to all of you.